An exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings, where a millionaire falls in love with a woman without a heart. She lives connected to machines, but when he truly gets to know her, something happens. But before I tell this story, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Continuing. The wind blew gently through the double windows of the private clinic in Lake Tahoe, making the white curtains dance like silent ghosts. Emma observed the lake for the 100th time that morning, her pale fingers tracing invisible patterns on the foggy glass. The monitor beside her bed emitted a regular mechanical beep, constantly reminding her of the artificial heart that had kept her body functioning for 12 years. On that autumn morning, the golden and red tones of the trees along the lakeshore seemed more intense than usual, as if nature wanted to provoke her with its exuberant display of life. Emma adjusted the light blue robe over her slender shoulders, making sure the wires that emerged discreetly from her chest were well hidden. "Miss Emma?" The soft, familiar voice of Martha, the 62-year-old nurse who had become her confidant over the years, filled the room. "It's a beautiful day to visit the greenhouse. The orchids you like so much are blooming." Emma turned slowly, a small smile playing on her lips. Martha stood at the door, her impeccable white uniform contrasting with her grey hair tied in an elegant bun. In her hands, she held a tray with tea and vanilla cookies, their shared morning ritual. "Orchids always bloom, Martha," Emma replied, her voice low and melodious. "It's as if time doesn't exist for them." "Just like for you, dear," said Martha, approaching to place the tray on the side table. "You remain as young as the day you arrived here." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, allowing the aroma of chamomile tea to fill her senses. "It's not youth, Martha. It's absence of real life, of experiences, of—" She hesitated, her fingers unconsciously touching her own lips. "Of everything that makes a person age naturally." Martha sat in the armchair next to the bed, serving the tea with the grace of years of practice. "You know what I think? That you're more alive than many people out there. You read more poetry in a day than most people do in their entire lives. You observe, reflect, feel. Emma picked up the offered cup, feeling the warmth through the fine porcelain, with an artificial heart. "It's like trying to swim in a frozen lake, Martha. You see the water, but you can't dive in." The nurse smiled wisely, years of experience with loss and recovery etched in every wrinkle of her face. "The heart isn't just a muscle, dear. You know that better than anyone. Why do you still read Rilke every night if not to feel?" Emma didn't respond immediately. Her eyes wandered to the bedside table, where her worn volume of Rilke's poems rested, marked with dozens of small colored ribbons. Maybe I read to remember what it was like to feel, or to imagine what it would be like." "Let's go to the greenhouse," suggested Martha, standing up and extending her hand. "You can bring your book. The orchids are great listeners." With a soft sigh, Emma accepted her help to stand. Her movements were graceful but cautious, as if her body was a glass box containing something precious and fragile. She took the Rilke book and let Martha guide her through the immaculate corridors of the clinic. The greenhouse was her sanctuary within the sanctuary, a world of glass and steam where rare plants grew in a controlled environment, not unlike her own existence. The air was dense and fragrant, and the natural light filtered through the glass roof created an almost dreamlike environment. Emma found her usual spot, a wooden bench strategically positioned between the lilies and orchids. She opened the book to a marked page, but before she could begin reading, male voices penetrated the quiet of her refuge. "The facilities are impressive, Dr. Wilson. The integration between research and treatment is exactly what we're looking for." The voice was deep with a peculiar accent, French mixed with something else, something familiar that Emma couldn't identify. She shrank slightly, hoping the visitors would pass quickly through there as they always did. "Mr. Miller, the greenhouse is one of our most special facilities," replied Dr. Wilson, the clinic's director. "We believe that patients' well-being—" The voices approached, and Emma kept her eyes fixed on her book, trying to become invisible among the plants. But then a sudden silence. She felt, even before seeing, that she was being observed. "I'm sorry," said the same deep voice from before, now closer. "We didn't mean to interrupt." Emma raised her eyes, meeting the intense gaze of a tall man of about 40, wearing an impeccably tailored suit. His eyes were a deep green, and there was something in his expression, a mixture of surprise and recognition, that made her feel exposed in a way she hadn't experienced in years. "This is Emma, one of our most special patients," introduced Dr. Wilson, his professional tone barely masking his pride. "A true miracle of medical technology." Emma felt her face heat up. She hated being presented like this as a scientific curiosity, a success example to be exhibited to important investors and visitors. But the man, Mr. Miller, she remembered, didn't seem to be looking at her as an interesting medical case. There was something more in his gaze, something that made her simultaneously want to hide and stay exactly where she was. "Ethan Miller," he introduced himself, stepping forward and extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Emma." She looked at the extended hand, hesitant. Physical contact hadn't been part of her world for so long that the simple gesture seemed surreal. Even so, moved by a force she didn't fully understand, she extended her own hand. The touch was brief, formal, but Emma felt something strange, not in the artificial heart beating in her chest, but somewhere deeper, more true. It was as if, for a moment, the glass that separated her from the world had vibrated, threatening to crack. "Rilke," he commented, noticing the book in her lap. "In the original German, I see. Who has not sat, anxious before his own heart?" Emma blinked, surprised. It was a less-known quote, one she herself had marked repeatedly in her book. "You know Rilke?" A soft smile touched Ethan's lips. "My sister." He paused, something dark passing through his eyes. "My sister used to recite him by heart." "Mr. Miller?" interrupted Dr. Wilson, checking his watch. "We have that meeting with the development team." Of course, Ethan nodded, but his eyes remained on Emma for another moment. "It was a pleasure, Emma. I hope we can talk about Rilke on another occasion." She watched as they walked away, voices returning to discuss business and technology. When they finally disappeared, Emma let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Well, well," murmured Martha, who had observed the entire scene in silence. "It seems the orchids won't be your only companions today." "Don't be silly, Martha," Emma replied, turning her eyes back to her book. "He's just another businessman interested in the technology that keeps me alive, nothing more." But as she pretended to read, Rilke's words danced in her mind, mixing with the memory of those green eyes that seemed to see through her layers of protection. And for the first time in a long time, the regular beat of her artificial heart seemed slightly off rhythm. That night, lying in her luxury hospital bed, Emma dreamed, not of machines or monitors, not of white and sterile corridors, but of glass gardens where orchids bloomed eternally, and a deep voice recited poetry she knew by heart. And in her dream, her heart, her true heart, the one that existed beyond, the machine trembled with an emotion she had long forgotten how to name. What she didn't know, as she slept, was that in his office in the administrative wing of the clinic, Ethan Miller was bent over documents related to the business merger, but his mind kept returning to the image of her sitting among the lilies, an ethereal figure who somehow painfully reminded him of his lost twin sister, and perhaps, just perhaps, of something more, something he wasn't yet ready to admit. The full moon bathed Lake Tahoe with its silver light, and inside the clinic, two hearts, one artificial and one natural, began, without knowing, a dance that would defy all medical and emotional odds. Fate, like the orchids in the greenhouse, was just beginning to bloom. Days at the clinic had a circular quality, like a carousel in perpetual motion. But since the meeting in the greenhouse, Emma noticed small changes in her routine, as if the universe was conspiring to create intersections between her path and Ethan Miller's. She saw him through the windows of the medical library, crossing the garden with determined steps. Occasionally their voices crossed in the corridors. He always formal, always correct, but with a look that carried unformulated questions. It was as if both were trapped in a silent dance, orbiting around each other without ever truly coming closer. On a particularly cold afternoon, while Emma was absorbed in her daily reading in the greenhouse, Martha's voice surprised her. "I have something for you," said the nurse, extending a cream envelope. "It was left at the nurse's station this morning." Emma took the envelope with hesitant fingers. Her name was written in an elegant, masculine handwriting. Inside she found not a letter but a page torn from an old book, a Rilke poem in German, with a single handwritten phrase in the margin. "Sometimes the miracle is not to survive, but to begin living again." "It's from him, isn't it?" Martha asked, sitting next to Emma. "From Mr. Miller." Emma nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the written words. "He shouldn't, it's not appropriate." "And why not?" Martha adjusted her uniform, a habit she had when she was about to give one of her maternal pieces of advice. "You're not a prisoner here, Emma. You're a patient, yes, but you're also a woman." "A woman with an artificial heart," Emma replied bitterly, carefully folding the page. "A woman who can offer nothing but worry and eventual sadness." Martha took Emma's hands between hers, forcing her to look into her eyes. "Let me tell you a story. When my Henry was in the hospital, in the last weeks before the stroke that took him, he told me something I never forgot. He said that each moment of love is worth a lifetime of waiting." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. "But you had years with Henry. I can't promise even tomorrow." "No one can, dear, no one can." The sound of footsteps interrupted the conversation. Ethan was standing at the entrance to the greenhouse, looking slightly uncomfortable for having interrupted an intimate moment. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I didn't mean to intrude." Martha stood up with a knowing smile. "There's no intrusion at all, Mr. Miller. In fact, I was just leaving." She gently squeezed Emma's shoulder before departing, leaving a silence heavy with possibilities in the air. Ethan remained where he was for a few moments, as if silently asking for permission to approach. Emma noticed that he wasn't wearing a suit today, but rather a light blue shirt and dark pants, a less formal appearance that made him seem more human, more accessible. "You received my message," he finally said, noticing the folded page in her lap. "You shouldn't have done that," Emma replied, but her voice carried no real reproach. "You're here on business, Mr. Miller." "Ethan," he corrected, taking a few steps toward her. "And yes, I originally came on business, but there are moments when fate has its own plans." He sat on the bench beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. The soft scent of his cologne mixed with the aroma of the flowers, creating an almost intoxicating atmosphere. "You remind me so much of her," Ethan said after a moment of silence. "My sister, Sarah. She too lived surrounded by books and poetry. She too had that ethereal quality, as if she belonged more to Rilke's verses than to the real world." Emma studied his profile, noticing the tension in his jaw when speaking of his sister. "What happened to her?" "The same condition you have," he replied, his eyes fixed on a distant point. "But that was 15 years ago, when the technology wasn't so advanced. His voice faltered slightly. "She didn't have the same chance you did." Emma's artificial heart maintained its steady rhythm, but something inside her, something deeper, more true, contracted with pain. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Ethan turned to face her. "It was because of her that I became interested in medical technology, that I built my company, that I'm here today." "Is that why you're being kind to me? Because you see your sister in me?" The question hung in the air like mist over the lake. Ethan stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "At first, perhaps," he admitted. "But now." His eyes met hers with an intensity that made Emma want to look away, but couldn't. "Now it's different." "Mr. Miller." "Ethan," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't know who I am, what I am." "I know more than you imagine," he replied, kneeling in front of her so that their eyes were at the same level. "I read your medical file. I shouldn't have, but I did. I know about every surgery, every adaptation, every moment of pain and hope. I know that you survived when everyone said it was impossible. Then you know I'm an experiment, a medical anomaly." "No," he said firmly. "I see a woman who found poetry in pain, who transformed a prison into a garden, who kept her humanity even when science tried to turn her into a machine. Emma felt her face burn. His words were dangerous, not because they were false, but because they touched on something she had, buried deep inside herself, the desire to be seen as more than her medical condition. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice just a whisper. "Because for the first time in 15 years I found someone who makes me want to risk feeling something again," Ethan replied, with an honesty that completely disarmed her. The moment was interrupted by the familiar sound of Emma's portable monitor, emitting a soft alert, a reminder that it was time for her afternoon medication. "I need to go," she said, rising quickly. "Martha will be looking for me." Ethan also stood up but made no move to stop her. "May I come see you tomorrow?" Emma hesitated at the entrance to the greenhouse. "I can't stop you. It's your clinic now, isn't it?" "No," he replied. "It's your sanctuary. I'll only come if you allow it." She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers tightened around the poem page he had given her. "The orchids," she finally said. "They bloom best in the morning." With that, she left, leaving Ethan alone among the flowers. He remained there for a long moment, observing the empty space where she had been, feeling as if something fundamental had changed in the universe. That night, as Emma prepared for bed, Martha entered her room with the night medications and found her looking out the window with a distant expression. "You?" "No," said the nurse as she organized the pills. "They say the heart has its own memory, that even when replaced it remembers how to love." Emma turned to her, surprised. "That has no scientific basis whatsoever, Martha." "Not everything that's true needs to be scientific, dear," Martha smiled, handing her the medicines. "Sometimes the greatest miracles happen precisely when we stop trying to explain them." After Martha left, Emma took her diary, a simple notebook where she occasionally noted thoughts and poems that touched her. For the first time in years, she felt like writing something of her own. The words flowed from her pen like water. There exists a type of courage that isn't measured in heartbeats, one that lives in the spaces between fear and desire, between the possible and the forbidden. Today I felt that courage trembling in my veins, not as a threat, but as a promise. On the other side of the clinic in his temporary office, Ethan was bent over business merger documents, but he couldn't concentrate. His eyes kept returning to a photograph on his desk, him and Sarah as teenagers, smiling at the camera, not knowing their time together would be so short. "Forgive me, Sarah," he murmured to the photograph, "but I think I finally understand what you always said about love being stronger than fear." Night advanced over Lake Tahoe, and two hearts, one artificial and one broken, began to learn a new language, one that couldn't be measured by monitors or explained by science. It was the ancient and dangerous language of hope. But in the shadows of the corridor, Dr. Wilson observed Emma's medical records with growing concern. The latest tests showed small anomalies, nothing alarming yet, but enough to sound an alarm in his experienced mind. He knew better than anyone that medical miracles sometimes had expiration dates, and as night embraced the clinic in its dark mantle, 3 people remained awake, one dreaming of possibilities she had never dared to consider, another fighting against memories that refused to die, and a third fearing a future he could see coming as inexorable as dawn. Spring came to Lake Tahoe like a painting in motion. The lake shores exploded in colors, and even through the clinic windows Emma could feel the change in the air. In recent weeks, her routine had transformed in subtle but profound ways. Ethan's visits had become as regular as the beeps of her artificial heart. Every morning he appeared in the greenhouse with a new poem or a rare book. Sometimes they stayed in silence, just reading together. Other times they talked for hours about literature, art, music, life. It was a delicate dance, where each unspoken word weighed as much as those pronounced. On that particular morning, Emma noticed something different in the air. Martha was more agitated than usual during the morning procedures, and the resident, doctors whispered in the corridors, casting glances in her direction. "There's something you're not telling me, isn't there?" Emma asked as Martha adjusted her heart monitor. The nurse hesitated for a moment, her experienced hands pausing over the electrodes. Dr. Wilson wants to talk to you this afternoon. He found some changes in your latest tests." Emma felt a familiar chill spread through her chest. "Is the artificial heart failing?" "Not exactly," Martha replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But there are complications. Dr. Wilson will explain better." Before Emma could ask more questions, a movement at the door caught her attention. Ethan was there, holding an old book and a small orchid in a crystal vase. His smile faltered as he perceived the tension in the environment. "Did something happen?" "No," Emma replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Martha was just doing the routine checkups." Martha gave Emma a meaningful look before standing up. "I'll leave you two alone. Don't forget your appointment with Dr. Wilson at 2, dear." After the nurse left, Ethan approached, placing the orchid on the table next to the bed. "It's the same species that was blooming the day we met," he explained. "I thought you might like to have a piece of the greenhouse here in your room." Emma touched the white petals delicately. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "But you shouldn't. Bring gifts. It complicates things." "Things are already complicated," Ethan replied, sitting in the chair near the bed. "And you're hiding something from me." She sighed, her fingers still playing with the orchid. "Petals. I have an important appointment today. Probably it's nothing." "Let me go with you," he asked, leaning forward. "Not as the clinic owner, but as someone who cares." Emma finally looked at him, truly looked. In recent weeks, she had tried to maintain an emotional distance, building invisible walls between them. But each visit, each conversation, each shared look had slowly eroded her defenses. "Why do you keep coming back, Ethan? What do you hope to find here?" He picked up the book he had brought, a first edition of Rilke's poems, and opened it to a marked page. "I found this last night. I thought you needed to hear it." In his deep, melodious voice, he began to read in German, then translating, "Who talks about victory? To endure is everything." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. "You don't understand. I can't let you get more involved. I can't be responsible for another loss in your life." "And who said you have a choice?" Ethan closed the book with sudden force. "Since I lost Sarah, I built my entire life around control. Each decision, each move, everything calculated to avoid pain. And then you appear, sitting among the flowers like a living page of poetry, and for the first time in 15 years, I feel like I'm really breathing." "Ethan." "No," he interrupted, standing up to pace around the room. "You want to know why I keep coming back? Because you make me want to be brave again. You, with your artificial heart and your poet's soul, have taught me more about being alive in these few weeks than I learned in years building empires." Emma's heart monitor recorded a small change in her rhythm, something that didn't go unnoticed by either of them. It was as if even her mechanical heart responded to the intensity of the moment. "What if I'm dying?" she whispered, finally verbalizing her greatest fear. "What if these tests show that my time is running out?" Ethan returned to her side, kneeling next to the bed so that their eyes were at the same level. "Then each moment until then will be a verse of the most important poem I've ever read." Time seemed to freeze. Emma could feel the warmth of his hand near hers on the sheet, without touching, always respecting the invisible boundaries she had established. It would be so easy to cross that small distance, to intertwine her fingers with his, to allow herself this small act of rebellion against her fate. But before she could make a decision, Dr. Wilson's voice sounded from the door. "Emma, can we move up our appointment? There are some urgent matters we need to discuss." The moment broke like crystal. Emma straightened in bed, resuming her usual posture of model patient. "Of course, doctor." Ethan rose slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'll be in the greenhouse," he said simply, "for as long as necessary." After he left, Dr. Wilson approached with a thick folder of tests. His face was more serious than normal, and Emma felt her artificial heart, that piece of technology that kept her alive, seem heavier in her chest. "Emma," the doctor began, adjusting his glasses, "we have a lot to discuss, and some important decisions to make." She nodded, preparing herself for what would come next. Through the window, she could see the reflection of the sun on Lake Tahoe, bright and relentless like the future approaching. On her bedside table, the orchid Ethan had brought opened its petals to the light, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding around it. In the corridor, Martha watched through the door window, her hands clasped in silent prayer. And somewhere in the clinic, among his orchids and rare books, Ethan Miller faced his own demons, fighting against memories of an old loss and the fear of a new one announcing itself. The clock on the wall marked each second with mechanical precision, reminding everyone that time, that precious resource that some had in abundance and others in scarcity, continued its inexorable course. And at that moment, in different corners of the clinic, 3 hearts beat in distinct rhythms, united by the same anxiety, by the same fragile hope, by the same fear of what Dr. Wilson's next words would reveal. The afternoon advanced over Lake Tahoe, and with it, the promise or the threat of a revelation that could change everything. The sun began its descent on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, as if nature itself wanted to offer a farewell spectacle. Or perhaps, just perhaps, a prelude to a new beginning. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the weight of this instant. In her chest, the artificial heart continued its constant rhythm, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions surrounding it. It was strange how something so mechanical could carry so many dreams, so many fears, so many unrealized possibilities. Dr. Wilson opened the test folder, the sound of paper breaking the silence like distant thunder. Emma opened, her eyes ready to face any truth that came. After all, as Rilke had said, and as Ethan had just reminded her, to endure is everything. And so, between the ticking of the clock and the regular beep of the heart monitor, began the consultation that could redefine not only her future, but also the meaning of life, love, and courage for all involved in this delicate dance between science and feeling. Dr. Wilson's office was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Emma watched as the doctor methodically organized the tests on his desk, each deliberate movement increasing her anxiety. His wife's portrait on the wall seemed to observe her with understanding eyes, as if she knew what was coming. "Emma, Doctor," Wilson began, removing his glasses to clean them, a habit she knew signaled difficult news. "For the past 12 years, your case has been a miracle of modern medicine. You have not only survived with an artificial heart longer than any other patient, but maintained a remarkable quality of life." She nodded, her hands lightly squeezing the fabric of her robe. "But something has changed." "Yes," he confirmed, replacing his glasses. "The latest tests show that your body is beginning to show signs of rejection to the device. It's subtle, still but consistent, and more concerning." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "We've detected microclots forming at the interfaces between the device and your blood vessels." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the information. "How long?" "Without intervention, months, maybe a year. We could try adjusting the medication, but it would only be palliative." "And with intervention?" Dr. Wilson stood up, walking to the window overlooking the lake. "There is a possibility, experimental. Our research team, in collaboration with Mr. Miller's company, has been developing a new type of artificial heart, more advanced, more compatible with human tissue, or there is the possibility of a biological transplant, a heart developed in the laboratory using your own stem cells. The technology is almost ready, but hasn't been tested in humans yet. It would be risky, but could offer a permanent solution." Emma felt a wave of dizziness. A real heart, not artificial? Yes, a heart that would grow with you, that would respond naturally to your emotions. But the procedure has significant risks. If it fails, I would die, she completed. Yes, and even if it's successful, the adaptation process would be intense. You would have to relearn to live with a heart that feels, that responds, that loves. The last word hung in the air like a musical note. Emma thought of Ethan, of his daily visits, the shared poems, the unrequited looks, of how her artificial heart maintained a constant rhythm even when her soul screamed to accelerate. How long do I have to decide? The microclots are concerning. I would recommend making a decision in the next few weeks. And Emma. He sat down again, leaning over the desk. I need you to understand something. Whatever your choice, there are no guarantees. The new artificial heart could fail, the biological transplant could be rejected, or both could work perfectly. Medicine is sometimes as unpredictable as love, she completed, a sad smile playing on her lips. Dr. Wilson smiled back gently. Speaking of which, I've noticed your interactions with Mr. Miller. Emma felt her face heat up. He's just being kind. He sees his sister in me. At first, perhaps, but now. The doctor picked up a pen, twirling it between his fingers. You know, in all these years, I've never seen your tests showing so many small rhythm variations as in the last few weeks. Your artificial heart maintains a constant pattern. But even so, there are subtle changes when he's around. That's impossible, Emma protested. It's a mechanical device. Perhaps there are things that science still can't completely explain. He paused as if considering his next words. Mr. Miller doesn't know about these results yet. As the clinic's main investor, he technically has access to all records, but he smiled. Let's say some files may take longer to be updated in the system. Emma understood the implicit kindness. It was a small window of time, a space for her to process everything before the news inevitably reached Ethan's ears. Thank you, Doctor. When she left the office, her legs were trembling slightly. The corridor seemed longer than usual, the white walls more oppressive. Martha waited for her outside, her face a mask of maternal concern. Dear? I need to be alone for a while, Martha, Emma murmured. Please. The nurse nodded, understanding, but before Emma could walk away, she gently held her arm. He's in the greenhouse, waiting. I know. Sometimes, Martha said softly, solitude isn't the best company for difficult decisions. Emma gently freed herself and walked toward her room. She needed to think, to process, to understand, but as she passed by the greenhouse, she couldn't help looking through the glass. Ethan was there, sitting among the orchids, an open book in his lap, but his eyes fixed on emptiness. There was something in his posture, a tension, an expectation that made her artificial heart feel heavy in her chest. In her room, Emma sat by the window, watching Lake Tahoe gleam under the afternoon sun. On the table beside her, the orchid Ethan had brought earlier opened its petals, indifferent to human dilemmas. She took her diary and began to write. How does one choose between different types of survival? Between a heart that doesn't fail, but doesn't feel, and one that could love but also break? Between the safety of solitude and the risk of connection? The words flowed from her pen, like tears held back for years, pages and more pages of fears, hopes, doubts. When she finally stopped, the sun was setting, painting her room in tones of gold and pink. The monitor beside the bed continued its regular beep, reminding her of her mechanical reality. A soft knock on the door brought her back to the present. It was Martha, with the dinner tray and her night medications. He's still there, the nurse informed as she organized the pills. Hasn't left the greenhouse all day. Emma closed her diary. He's stubborn. Like someone I know, Martha smiled, sitting on the edge of the bed. You know, when Henry was sick, I tried to push everyone away. I thought I was protecting the people I loved from the pain of losing me. You know what he told me? Emma shook her head. He said that denying love for fear of pain is like refusing to breathe for fear of running out of air. Martha adjusted Emma's pillow with maternal care. Sometimes, dear, the greatest courage isn't in fighting alone, but in allowing someone to fight by your side. After Martha left, Emma sat looking at the orchid on her table. Its white petals seemed to glow in the twilight, like small moons captured in crystal. She rose slowly, adjusting her robe and the wires coming from her chest. Her steps through the corridors were silent, almost ghostly. The clinic was quiet at that hour, only the occasional whisper of nurses changing shifts. When she reached the Giu greenhouse, she stopped at the entrance, her artificial heart maintaining its constant rhythm even when her whole being seemed to vibrate. Ethan was exactly where Martha had said, still sitting among the orchids. The book was now closed in his lap and his eyes were closed, as if he were meditating. The twilight light came through the greenhouse glass, creating dancing shadows on his face. "You stayed?" she said softly. He opened his eyes, but didn't move. "I promised I would." "Why?" "Because some promises are easy to keep." He finally looked at her. "The tests." "Not tonight," she interrupted, taking a step toward him. "Tonight I want you to read me more Rilke." A soft smile touched his lips. "Which poem?" "The one about angels and birds, about how the fear of flying doesn't prevent wings from existing." Ethan opened the book, its pages rustling softly in the quietness of the greenhouse. Emma sat on the bench beside him, closer than usual, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, to breathe the soft aroma of his cologne mixed with the scent of flowers. And as his deep voice filled the air with verses about courage and transformation, Emma allowed herself, for the first time in 12 years, to imagine a future where her heart, artificial or biological, could do more than just keep beating. A future where it could, perhaps, learn to dance. The days following Dr. Wilson's revelation were a strange interlude between reality and dream. Emma felt like a character from one of the novels she read so much, suspended between two possible lives, each breath carrying the weight of a decision not yet made. The clinic routine continued, but with subtle alterations. Martha began monitoring her vital signs more frequently, although she tried to disguise this extra vigilance with casual conversations and extra cups of tea. Dr. Wilson appeared at irregular hours, always with new information about both procedures, always careful not to pressure, but time slipping through everyone's fingers like fine sand. And Ethan was different. He still came every day, still brought books and poems, still sat with her in the greenhouse. But there was a new intensity in his eyes, as if he could sense that something fundamental had changed, even without knowing exactly what. On a particularly cold morning, as the first snows of winter began to fall over Lake Tahoe, Emma found an envelope under her door. Inside, besides the usual Rilke poem, there was a small handwritten card. "Meet me in the greenhouse at sunset. I have something to show you. E." The day dragged on, with the particular slowness of anxiously awaited hours. When the sun began, its descent on the horizon painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Emma made her way to the greenhouse. What she found made her stop, at the entrance breathless. The space had been transformed. Small lights had been strategically placed among the plants, creating an almost magical environment. In the center, where her favorite bench normally stood, was a small table set for two, with fine china and crystal glasses. Ethan stood by the table, more formal than usual in a well-tailored dark suit. Seeing her, his face lit up with a smile that made Emma's artificial heart register a small variation in its rhythm. "You came," he said, advancing to pull out a chair for her. "What is all this?" Emma asked, looking around in wonder. "A dinner," he replied simply. "Since you can't leave the clinic, I thought I'd bring a bit of the outside world to you." Emma sat down, noticing the details of the table, the silver cutlery, the fresh flowers, the fine porcelain set that seemed antique and valuable. "This is exaggerated?" Ethan completed with a smile, sitting on the other side. "Probably, but you deserve something extraordinary." A waiter, whom Emma recognized as Jean, the clinic's chef, approached with a bottle of non-alcoholic wine. "Mademoiselle, monsieur," he greeted with a complicit smile as he served the glasses. "You planned all of this," Emma observed, still absorbing the details of the scene. "With the help of some accomplices," Ethan admitted. Martha was particularly enthusiastic in helping. Something about it was about time. Emma couldn't help but smile. She could perfectly imagine Martha organizing everything, ensuring that every detail was perfect. Dinner was served. Delicate and elegant dishes, specially prepared considering Emma's dietary restrictions. The conversation flowed naturally, as it always did between them, but there was something different in the air, an expectation, a sweet and dangerous tension. Between the main course and dessert, Ethan stood up and walked to a small vintage record player that Emma hadn't noticed before. After a few moments, the soft notes of La Vie en Rose filled the environment. "Dance with me," he said, extending his hand. Emma felt her artificial heart slightly accelerate. "Ethan, you know I can't. The wires, the monitors, we can." "Dance right here," he gently insisted. "Just a moment, a memory to keep." Something in the way he said memory made Emma suspect he knew more than he let on. Still, she allowed herself to be lifted, to be guided to a small space between the orchids. His arms enveloped her with infinite gentleness, as if she were made of crystal. They began to move slowly, more swaying than really dancing, enough to not compromise any of the medical equipment that kept her alive. "When Sarah was sick," Ethan began softly, his voice close to her ear, "she used to say that the worst part wasn't the fear of dying, but the fear of not having lived enough." Emma felt her hands tremble slightly against the fabric of his suit. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know something changed after your last consultation with Dr. Wilson." He moved slightly away to look into her eyes. "Don't tell me what it is. I know you're not ready. But I need you to know something." The music continued softly in the background, Edith Piaf singing about seeing life in pink, while Ethan held Emma's face between his hands with infinite tenderness. "When I lost Sarah, I swore I would never allow myself to feel that kind of pain again. I built walls, created companies, immersed myself in work and technology. I thought I was protecting myself." He paused, his intense green eyes fixed on hers. "And then I found you, sitting here among the flowers, reading Rilke as if the world outside didn't exist, and for the first time in 15 years the walls began to crumble." "Ethan, please." Emma tried to move away, but he maintained his gentle embrace. "I'm not asking for anything," he continued. "I'm not demanding promises or making plans. I just want you to know that whatever path lies ahead of you, you don't need to walk it alone." The tears Emma had been holding back for days finally began to fall. "You don't understand. I could leave. Or worse, I could stay and be completely different. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking," he interrupted gently. "I'm offering. And if there's one thing I learned from Sarah, it's that each moment of true feeling is worth more than a lifetime of safety." The music ended, but they continued swaying gently, caught in their own bubble of time. Emma could feel his heart beating, a real heart, alive, capable of feeling and suffering. Her own artificial heart maintained its precise rhythm, but for the first time she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to have a heart that could dance to the rhythm of his. "I'm afraid," she whispered against his chest. "I know," he replied, his lips softly brushing her hair. "And it's okay to be afraid. Just don't let fear decide for you." A movement at the entrance to the greenhouse caught the attention of both. It was Martha, looking apologetic for interrupting. "Emma, dear, it's time for your night medications." They separated slowly, like reluctant dancers leaving the stage. Ethan held Emma's hand between his for a moment. "Think about what I said, and remember, sometimes the greatest act of courage is allowing yourself to be loved." That night in her room, Emma couldn't sleep. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, mixing with the options presented by Dr. Wilson. A new artificial heart, safe, reliable but still a prison of technology. Or a real heart, risky, uncertain but capable of truly feeling. She took her diary and began to write. "There are different types of courage. The courage to survive, which I've known for 12 years. The courage to leave, which I may need to know soon. And now the most frightening of all, the courage to live fully, to risk, to love." On the other side of the clinic, in his office, Ethan was bent over medical reports, not Emma's, which had not yet been updated in the system, but research. On heart transplants, studies on rejection, articles about artificial hearts. In his mind, the memory of her in his arms, so fragile and yet so strong, danced with the shadows of a past he never truly managed to overcome. And at the nursing station, Martha made her night notes with a soft smile on her lips. In her many years of profession, She had learned to recognize the signs, both medical and those of the heart, and something told her that, regardless of the decision Emma made, a profound transformation had already begun. The snow continued to fall softly over Lake Tahoe, covering the world in a white mantle of possibilities. In the greenhouse, the orchids swayed gently under the small light still on, silent witnesses to a moment when two hearts, one natural and one artificial, found a way to dance together, even if only for one song. The morning after the dinner in the greenhouse dawned with a different clarity. The snow that had fallen during the night had transformed Lake Tahoe into a postcard in white and silver, and Emma was watching the still falling flakes through the window of her room when Martha entered for the morning procedures. "Did you sleep?" "Well, dear," the nurse asked, although her smile suggested she already knew the answer. "Not really," Emma admitted, adjusting herself in bed as Martha checked her monitors. "I kept reliving every moment of last night, every word, every dance," Martha completed with a mischievous gleam in her eyes. Emma felt her face heat up. "You knew all along what he was planning." "Of course I knew. Who do you think helped choose the music? And convinced Jean to prepare that special menu?" The nurse sat on the edge of the bed, her expression becoming more serious. "But now we need to talk about something important. Dr. Wilson wants to see you this morning. The latest tests have arrived." The brief moment of lightness evaporated like mist in the sun. "So soon?" "The sooner we know exactly what we're facing, the better we can plan the next steps." Martha gently squeezed her hand. "And this time you're not alone." As if summoned by these words, a soft knock sounded at the door. It was Ethan, more casual today in a dark blue sweater that made his eyes look even greener. He carried a small bouquet of white flowers. "May I come in?" Emma nodded, noticing how Martha discreetly found an excuse to leave them alone. Ethan approached, placing the flowers in a vase beside the bed. "Edelweiss," he explained. "Flowers that survive the harshest winter in the Alps. I thought it would be appropriate." "Ethan, about last night." "No," he interrupted softly, sitting in the chair near the bed. "Don't apologize, don't try to explain, don't try to create distance. What happened last night was real. What was said was true. And what wasn't said—" He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "Well, some truths don't need words." Emma felt her artificial heart register a small variation, those small anomalies that had been becoming more frequent in his presence. "I have an appointment with Dr. Wilson now." "I know." He took her hand, his fingers naturally intertwining with hers. "Do you want me to go with you?" The question took Emma by surprise. It was a simple offer, but loaded with meaning. Accepting. His presence at the consultation would mean allowing him to know everything. The risks, the options, the frightening possibilities that were taking shape in her future. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." The path to Dr. Wilson's office was made in silence, their hands still joined. When they arrived, the doctor was already waiting for them, his face a professional mask that revealed nothing. "Emma," he greeted, then looked at Ethan, with a slightly raised eyebrow. "Mr. Miller." "He can stay," Emma said quickly. "Please." The doctor nodded, gesturing for them to sit. "Well, let's get to the facts then. The latest tests confirmed our initial suspicions. The microclots are forming more quickly than we anticipated, and there are increasing signs of tissue rejection." Emma felt Ethan's hand squeeze hers slightly. "How much time do we have to make a decision?" "Weeks, not months, as I initially thought." Dr. Wilson removed his glasses, rubbing his tired eyes. "The new artificial heart is ready for implantation. It's our safest option, with a success rate of approximately 85%. "And the biological transplant?" Ethan asked, his voice controlled but tense. "It's more complicated. The organ is being cultivated in the laboratory, using Emma's stem cells. The process is progressing well, but—" He hesitated. "The success rate is significantly lower, something around 40%. The silence that followed was heavy as accumulated snow. Emma could feel the conflict emanating from Ethan, his pragmatic nature probably screaming for the safer option. while something deeper, more emotional, understood the appeal of a true heart. "And if," Emma began, her voice almost a whisper, "and if I choose to do nothing?" "Emma," Ethan protested, but she squeezed his hand, asking for silence. "It's a valid question," Dr. Wilson responded calmly. "Without intervention, the clots will eventually cause serious complications. The current device would fail within 3 to 4 months, at most." "So these are my options," Emma said, more to herself than to the others. "A new artificial heart, safe, reliable but still a prison. A biological heart, risky but with the promise of a true life, or—" "There is no or," Ethan interrupted, his voice firm. "I won't accept that." Emma turned to him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "It's not your decision to make." "No, it's not. But it's my right to fight for what I believe in. And I believe in you, not just in your survival, but in your life. In all the possibilities that haven't been explored yet, in all the moments that haven't been lived yet." Dr. Wilson discreetly cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should give you a moment to talk in private. The detailed tests are here." He pushed a folder across the desk. "Take all the time you need to review them." After the doctor left, a heavy silence fell over the office. Emma stood up, walking to the window. The snow continued falling outside, each flake a small decision of the universe about its path to the ground. "When Sarah was dying," Ethan began, his voice low but clear, "she made me promise something. Not that I would move on, not that I would be happy. Typical promises that dying people make. No. She made me promise that I would never let the fear of losing prevent me from loving." Emma didn't turn around, but she could see his reflection in the window glass, still sitting, his eyes fixed on her back. "For 15 years, I broke that promise. I built walls, created distance, transformed love into technology and healing, into numbers, and then he stood up, approaching her. "Then I found you. And for the first time since Sarah, I felt fear again. Not fear of losing, but fear of never having tried." "It's different," Emma whispered. "Sarah had no choice. I do. And if I choose the riskier path, if I die, you'll have to live with the weight of that decision too." "No," he said firmly, turning her to face him. "I will live with the weight of having supported you in your quest for a full life, whatever the outcome. The only decision that would destroy me would be to see you choose survival instead of life because of me." Silent tears began to stream down Emma's face. "I'm so afraid," she admitted. "Not of death, but of how much I want to live, of how much I want to feel, of how much I want to—" "Love me?" he completed softly. "Love you," she confirmed, the first time the words were spoken, aloud, with a real heart, one that can accelerate when you're near, that can dance without fear, that can feel everything, not just echoes and shadows of feelings. Ethan cradled her face between his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "So is that what you want, the biological transplant? It's crazy, isn't it, choosing the most dangerous option?" "It's the most courageous option," he corrected, "and you're the most courageous person I've ever met." At that moment, a ray of sunlight broke through the snow clouds, illuminating the office with an almost supernatural clarity. Emma looked at the tests scattered on the desk, graphs, numbers, probabilities, her entire life reduced to statistics and percentages. "I'll need some guarantees from you," she finally said. "Anything." If it doesn't work out," she held his face between her hands, forcing him to maintain eye contact. "Promise that you won't blame yourself, that you won't build more walls, that you'll keep your promise to Sarah." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, they were misting. "Only if you promise something in return." "What?" "Promise that you'll fight with everything you have, not just for survival, but for life, for us." Emma felt her artificial heart register another small variation, as if even that piece of technology knew that a crucial moment was happening. "I promise." When Dr. Wilson returned a few minutes later, he found them sitting together, hands intertwined, the decision clear on their faces. No words were necessary. He already knew which path they had chosen. "I'll schedule the surgery for 2 weeks from now," he said, taking his calendar. "The biological heart will be ready then. We'll need to do a series of preparatory tests and—" Emma barely heard the medical details. Her eyes were fixed on her hands joined with Ethan's, thinking about how in 2 weeks she could have a heart capable of truly feeling that touch, or she could no longer be there to feel anything. Later that night, alone in her room, Emma wrote in her diary, "Today I chose life, not safe survival, not the known path, but the wild and frightening possibility of living fully. I chose the chance to have a heart that can love without restrictions, that can hurt and heal, that can dance and break and be reborn. If this is my last act of courage, let it also be my first act of true freedom." Outside, the snow continued to fall over Lake Tahoe, each flake tracing its own path to the ground. In 2 weeks, a new heart would beat, or not, in her chest. And for the first time in 12 years, Emma wasn't just waiting for the future. She was walking courageously toward it, hand in hand with someone who understood both the price and the value of true love. The days before a major change have a special quality, as if each moment were simultaneously eternal and fleeting. For Emma, the 2 weeks preceding her surgery transformed into a kaleidoscope of tests, preparations, and stolen moments of intimacy with Ethan. The clinic routine had subtly changed. The nurses treated her with an almost reverential gentleness, as if she were something precious and fragile. Dr. Wilson appeared several times a day, always with new tests, always with that look that mixed hope and professional concern. And Martha was present more than ever, not just as a nurse but as an emotional anchor amid the storm of changes. "I brought something special today," Martha announced on a particularly cold morning, entering Emma's room with an old box in her hands. "I found it while organizing my closet at home." Emma put aside the book she was reading, another gift from Ethan, a first edition of Pablo Neruda's poems. "What is it?" Martha sat on the edge of the bed and opened the box with reverential care. Inside was a set of letters yellowed by time, held together by a faded ribbon. "Love letters," the nurse explained, her eyes shining with memories. "Henry wrote me a letter every day during our first year together. Even when we were in the same house, he found a moment to write something, sometimes just a line, sometimes entire pages." Emma carefully picked up one of the letters, feeling the texture of the old paper between her fingers. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand something about true love," Martha replied, selecting another letter from the box. "See the date on this one." Emma examined the envelope. 3 days before he passed. Yes, he could barely hold the pen, but he insisted on writing. "Do you know what it says?" Emma shook her head, unable to speak. "My Martha," the nurse began to read, her voice choked with emotion. "Today the doctor said my heart is failing, but he's wrong. My heart has never been stronger because it's full of our love. And love, my dear, doesn't die with the flesh. It continues echoing in the universe like music that no one can silence." Silent tears streamed down Emma's face. Her own artificial heart maintained its constant rhythm, oblivious to the emotional storm, consuming her. "Henry understood something fundamental," Martha continued, carefully putting the letter away. "That true love isn't measured in heartbeats or years lived. It's measured in moments of courage, in choices made not despite fear, but through it." How did you move on?" Emma asked, her voice just a whisper. "One day at a time. And with the certainty that I had been truly loved. It's the kind of certainty that keeps you standing, even when everything else collapses." Martha took Emma's hands in hers. "And that's why you can't give up now, because you finally found that kind of love." As if summoned by these words, a soft knock sounded at the door. It was Ethan, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Am I interrupting something?" "Never," Martha smiled, standing up. "Actually, I was just leaving. These letters need to go back home." She winked at Emma before leaving. leaving a soft scent of lavender in the air. Ethan approached the bed, noticing the traces of tears on Emma's face. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," she smiled, wiping her face. "Martha was just giving me a lesson about love." "Ah," he smiled, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "And what did you learn?" "That sometimes the greatest proof of love is the courage to move forward, from both sides." Ethan was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Then, as if suddenly remembering, he extended the package he was carrying. "I brought something for you." Emma carefully undid the wrapping. Inside was a new diary, bound in dark blue leather, with golden details on the edges. "For your new life," he explained. "For when your heart can write its own stories. And if," she hesitated, "and if I'm not here to write in it, then I'll write for you," he answered simply. "Each moment we shared, each unspoken word, each possibility we imagined together. It will be our story, either way." Emma traced the golden details of the diary with her fingers, feeling the texture of the leather under her skin. "Only 3 days left." "I know. I'm scared." "Me too." The honesty of the response took her by surprise. She raised her eyes, finding his full of a raw and true emotion. "You know what's funny?" he continued, taking her hand. "I always thought my greatest fear was losing someone I love again, but I discovered there's an even greater fear. The fear of not having loved enough while there was time. Is that why you're here every day, trying to ensure there will be no regrets?" "No," he shook his head. "I'm here because every moment with you is a gift, even the moments of fear, even the moments of doubt. Each second is precious because it's real." Emma felt her artificial heart register another one of those small variations that had become so frequent in his presence, as if even that precise mechanism recognized something fundamentally true in what was happening. "I read somewhere," she said softly, "that when a human heart is transplanted, it carries memories with it. Not conscious memories, but something deeper, as if the cells keep echoes of emotions experienced. And what do you think about that?" I think maybe it's true. Not in a scientific way, but in an older, more mysterious way." She squeezed his hand. "And if it's true, I want my new heart, from its first beat, to carry the memory of this moment, of the courage to choose to love, even knowing it may hurt." Ethan raised her hand to his lips, softly kissing her fingers. "Then let's give it more. Memories to carry." In the days that followed, they created a treasure of moments, small gestures, whispered words, shared looks. Ethan read poetry to her in the greenhouse, his words mixing with the scent of flowers. Emma shared stories of her years at the clinic, of the small victories and defeats that had shaped her existence. On the eve of the surgery, Dr. Wilson made his last pre-operative consultation. The biological heart was ready, developed from Emma's own cells, a miracle of modern science awaiting its moment. "Tomorrow at 7, he confirmed, making his final notes. "The team is prepared, the organ is in perfect condition. All we need now is—" "A miracle," Emma completed with a small smile. "No," the doctor replied, surprising her. "Miracles are for those who have no more hope. You have something much more powerful. You have determination, you have love, you have a reason to fight." That night, contrary to all protocols, Ethan got permission to stay beyond visiting hours. They were in the greenhouse, their special place, where everything had begun. "I want you to keep something for me," Emma said, giving him her old diary. "Only open it if—" "No," he gently interrupted. "I'll keep it, but you yourself will show me your favorite parts when you're recovered." She smiled, leaning against him in the chair they shared. "You're stubbornly optimistic." "I learned from someone who chose the hardest path because she believed in the possibility of true love." Emma's heart monitor emitted its regular beep, as it had done for 12 years. Tomorrow, if all went well, a new rhythm would take its place, a natural, unpredictable, truly alive rhythm. "Ethan?" "Yes?" When I wake up with my new heart, I want the first thing it feels to be you. I want your face to be the first memory it records." He kissed her forehead softly. I'll be there, I promise." Later, alone in her room, Emma opened the new diary Ethan had given her. On the first page, she wrote, "To the heart I don't yet know. Be gentle with this life you're about to inherit. There's so much love waiting to be felt, so much joy to be experienced, and there's someone special waiting to teach you how to dance." Night advanced over Lake Tahoe, and in different parts of the clinic, different people prepared for the next day in distinct ways. Dr. Wilson reviewed the procedure for the 100th time. Martha organized the post-operative room with special care. And Ethan. Ethan was standing by the window of his office, looking at the same moon that Emma was observing from her room. In a few hours, everything would change. One heart would stop, another would begin. And, in the space between those two beats, the entire future was suspended, waiting to know if love would be strong enough to create its own miracle. The morning of the surgery arrived with a surreal clarity. The snow had stopped during the night, leaving Lake Tahoe covered by an immaculate white mantle. Emma woke before dawn, her artificial heart maintaining its constant rhythm, the last mechanical beats that would mark her life, one way or another. Martha entered the room at 5:30, bringing not only the usual medical preparations, but also a small branch of Edelweiss, the same resistant flowers that Ethan had given her days before. "He asked me to deliver it," the nurse explained, putting the flowers in a vase. "He's been in the surgical center since 4 in the morning, supervising every detail of the preparation." Emma smiled softly. It was so typical of Ethan, trying to control even the most technical aspects of the procedure, as if his meticulous attention could guarantee the success of the operation. "Martha," Emma called as the nurse began the preoperative procedures, "I need you to promise something. Anything, dear. If something goes wrong, take care. Solve him for me. Don't let him close himself off again. Don't let him turn this into another wall." Martha stopped what she was doing, her teary eyes meeting Emma's. "You will be able to take care of him personally, but I promise anyway." Dr. Wilson arrived at 6:30, accompanied by his team. There was a contained energy in the air, a mixture of professional tension and cautious hope. "Are you ready?" he asked, reviewing her vital signs one last time. Emma nodded, although ready was an inadequate word to describe the whirlwind of emotions she felt. How could anyone be truly ready to exchange the heart that had kept them alive for 12 years for a new, unknown one, full of possibilities and risks? When they began to take her bed toward the surgical center, Emma noticed that the clinic corridors were different. Nurses, doctors, and even patients had come out of their rooms and posts, forming a kind of silent corridor. Some smiled encouragingly, others had tears in their eyes. It was as if the entire clinic was holding its breath, united in hope for her particular miracle. At the entrance to the surgical center, Ethan was waiting. He was dressed in blue surgical clothing, as if he intended to follow every moment of the operation, but Emma knew that even his influence had limits. He would have to wait outside like everyone else. "Hey," he said softly when the stretcher briefly stopped beside him. "Hey," she replied, her voice just a whisper. "Remember what Rilke said about courage?" Emma smiled weakly. "That it is only fear that has said its prayers." "Exactly." He leaned down, kissing her forehead with infinite tenderness. "I've already said all my prayers. Now I just need you to fight." "Ethan," she held his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, always slightly cold due to the artificial circulation. "If I don't—" "When you wake up," he interrupted firmly, "I'll be here. And then we'll discover together what it's like to have a heart that can really dance." It was a promise, a declaration of faith, a refusal to accept any other outcome. Emma felt tears escape from her eyes, but before she could say anything else, the nurses began to move the stretcher again. The last glimpse she had was of Ethan standing in the corridor, tall and strong in his blue surgical uniform, his green eyes never leaving hers until the double doors of the surgical center closed between them. Inside the operating room, the light was intense and cold. Dr. Wilson and his team moved with the precision of a well-rehearsed orchestra, each instrument in its place, each person knowing exactly their role. "We're going to start the anesthesia," the anesthesiologist announced softly. "Count with me, Emma. From 10 backward." As the numbers escaped from her lips, Emma thought of all the lives she had lived in that same body. The 27-year-old girl who had received the death sentence, the woman who had survived against all odds with an artificial heart. And now this new version of herself, someone who had chosen to risk everything for the chance to live fully, to love completely. 5, 4. The regular beep of her artificial heart sounded like background music, a last mechanical waltz before the silence. 3 in 2. Her last conscious image was of Ethan's face, not as it was moments before, but as she had seen it for the first time in the greenhouse, looking at her as if he had found something precious and unexpected among the orchids. 1. And then, darkness. Outside the operating room, time acquired a different quality. Martha alternated between her regular duties and frequent checks in the waiting area, where Ethan remained motionless, looking through the large windows at the frozen lake, Tahoe. The hours dragged on. Occasionally, a team member would come out to give brief updates. The artificial heart had been successfully removed. The new organ was being prepared. The connections were being made. Each piece of news was received with a silent nod, as if words could somehow disturb the delicate balance between hope and fear. It was during the 8th hour of surgery that something changed. The movement inside the operating room intensified, visible through the small windows in the double doors. More equipment was rushed inside. Dr. Wilson could be seen making more energetic gestures than normal. Ethan rose from his chair, his body tense like a violin string about to snap. Martha approached, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Have faith," she whispered. "She's stronger than everyone thinks." The following minutes were an eternity compressed into instants. And then finally Dr. Wilson emerged from the operating room. His face was marked by the fatigue of hours of intense concentration, but his eyes were shining. "The new heart is beating," he announced, removing his surgical mask. "On its own, strong and regular. The next 48 hours will be critical, but..." He allowed himself a small smile. "I think our Emma got her miracle." Ethan staggered slightly, as if the relief was too physical a weight to bear. Martha hugged him, tears freely running down her wrinkled face. The following hours were a blur of intense monitoring, medications, and constant vigilance. Emma was taken to the ICU, connected to a series of monitors different from those that had marked her life for so long. The sound that filled the room now was no longer the mechanical and regular beep of the artificial heart, but the slightly irregular, perfectly imperfect rhythm of a true heart. It was almost 36 hours after the surgery that Emma began to show the first signs of consciousness. Her fingers moved slightly, her eyes fluttered under closed eyelids. Ethan, who hadn't left her side except when forced by the medical team, leaned in closer. "Emma?" Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding his. Her lips moved, trying to form words. "Don't try to speak yet," he whispered, holding her hand. "Just squeeze my hand if you can hear me." She squeezed, weakly but definitely. "Welcome back," he smiled, unshed tears shining in his eyes. "Your new heart is doing an amazing job." Emma blinked slowly, then brought her free hand to her chest. Where before there had been the rigid outline of the artificial device, now there were only bandages, and beneath them the soft and regular sensation of natural heartbeats. In the days that followed, each small progress was a victory celebrated. The first moment she was able to sit up on her own, the first time she walked a few steps around the room, the first time she felt her new heart naturally accelerate in response to an emotion, when Ethan entered the room carrying a bouquet of orchids from the greenhouse. 2 weeks after the surgery, on a particularly clear afternoon, Ethan found her writing in her new diary, sitting in her favorite armchair by the window. "What are you writing?" he asked, sitting beside her. "About how different it is," she replied, her voice stronger each day. "Every sensation, every emotion, it's as if I were learning everything again. This heart, it feels everything so intensely." "Any regrets?" "Not." For a second, she closed the diary, turning to him. Do you know what's most extraordinary? Being able to feel my heart truly react to you. Not just echoes or shadows of feelings, but real, living, pulsating emotions. Ethan took her hand, his fingers naturally finding her pulse. I can feel it, he smiled. It's accelerating now. That's because... She hesitated, then continued with new courage. It's because I love you. And now, I can feel that love in every beat. It was the first time she had said the words aloud, and her new heart celebrated the moment with a particular dance in her chest. Ethan stood up, extending his hand to her. In that case, I think it's time to fulfill a promise. What promise? To teach your new heart to dance for real. He turned on the small radio on the side table, and the soft notes of La Vie en Rose filled the room, the same music from their first dance in the greenhouse. Emma stood up slowly, still careful with her movements, but stronger each day. This time, when Ethan took her in his arms, there were no monitors to interfere, no wires to be careful of. Just two hearts beating in their own rhythms, finding a harmony that no machine could replicate. And when he finally kissed her, soft and deep, Emma felt her new heart sing, not with the mechanical echo of simulated emotions, but with the full and overwhelming symphony of true love. At her nursing station, Martha watched the couple through the window of the room, a knowing smile on her wrinkled face. Beside her, Dr. Wilson was making his final notes in Emma's medical record. "You know," he commented, "in all my years of medicine, I've never seen anything like it. It's almost as if love were the best medicine," Martha completed with a smile. "As if some miracles needed only the right courage to happen," he corrected, closing the file. The snow was beginning to melt outside, announcing the arrival of spring. In the greenhouse, the orchids continued their eternal cycle of blooming, silent witnesses to how love, like nature, always finds a way to be reborn. And in the room illuminated by the afternoon sun, two hearts, both equally real, equally alive, continued their dance, learning together the rhythm of a new life, a new beginning, a love that had waited 12 years to be truly felt.